Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deeply Graphic Designcast. I'm your host, Nick Longo, and this is going to be our last one of 2024. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to squeeze one in, but you know how it is, the end of the year. I've been watching a lot of fun stuff on YouTube and catching what a lot of the folks I follow are doing, and they do these recaps. They do these really cool things that are kind of like the top 10 lessons that they learned in their podcast or their show or their episodes that they've created. And I was thinking back of this year, and what I really loved was the kind of diversity that we had with all of the guests and the people that we've talked to over this last year. And there's so many great little nuggets. So I thought, let's make a short top 10 video of the best words of wisdom, the biggest things that kind of stood out for me. And I'm gonna start with this first one. I'm calling it Learn the Rules and Then Break Them. And this came from my conversation with my buddy James Martin, and we were talking a little bit about the revolutionizing of design education. And it was such a great conversation to have with him. As an educator, I'm always trying to find out what could we start doing to make the design school process more robust, more along the lines of what's happening in today's world and in the industry, particularly with like how we handle AI, how we handle kind of the troubling job market that's out there right now all over the place. But one of the things we talked about was master the basics first. And that's one of those things that always sticks with me when I think about design education or how to teach, or the way I wish I was taught was probably a little bit more in focus with this. But if you can master those basics first and build a strong foundation in the design principles, those are those things that will never fade away. Those are those things that will never go away. And anything you build on top of that, regardless of where you get into and what you plan to do in a design career, I think you're so much more confident with that solid foundation. And then you can bend and break those rules when needed. Because in so many different ways and so many different conversations we've had this year, we found that yes, you should know your basics and you should know your design principles, but the examples that we see that are so kind of memorable or break through in so many different ways are those ones that do break the rules. And it's okay to do that from time to time. And in fact, I think sometimes the new client out there is really gonna want to see that because they're seeing such great examples of people that break the rules. And another great thing that came out of this one was this line about staying curious and keep evolving. If we don't do those two things, then we're just very static, right? We could be the king or queen of design principles, but if we are not staying curious and evolving our skill sets and evolving our process, evolving our inspiration, evolving everything else that's kind of we see around us in pop culture, in you name it, in architecture, in art, in film, in music, in fashion, whatever it might be, to keep looking at these things, get inspiration from more and more people. Education doesn't stop after school. And I think in a lot of ways, I'm seeing my students blossom even more nowadays because there's so much more waiting for them once they get out of school and into their first few jobs. So I love that idea to keep learning, keep experimenting, and push those boundaries to grow as a creative. I think that's the one thing, if I talk to so many people in our field, what are you envious about? In most cases, I will hear people saying, I don't push the boundaries, or I'm staying safe. And I think I've even said that many times this past year in so many different conversations with the guests that we've had on here, that once you admit that, I think, and just saying it out loud that, you know, am I too safe as a designer? Do I push the boundaries? All of a sudden, that started to happen a little bit more. So that's number one. Number two, you can be whoever you want and still succeed. And this came from a conversation with Jess Goldsmith. Love Jess. She's become a really good friend. We got to hang out at a few Adobe events over the year. And what I loved about her was her kind of like no holds barred authenticity, the way she just tackles things. You could tell she is like truly in control. She could be whatever she wants to be as a designer, as a creative, as a person. And what's neat about it is she's showing success. And if anyone has ever kind of questioned, like, can I do this? Do I have permission to do this? If you're waiting around for that, it'll never happen. And I loved bringing her on because I think she opened that kind of permission door to do those things and try something different. Some of the stuff she said was try everything. I think the title of that episode was 1,000 Different Things. And that really resonated with me. It was like, wow, these are those things, like maybe I am too safe in my zone, or do I explore and kind of like venture out of my normal process to try everything, doing that in the background before something's shown to a client, or the things that you do before you're presenting, or before you're bringing or giving the work over. Are you trying everything? And she said things like, don't be afraid to experiment with these different styles or a different medium. And whatever you're trying to do, find the approach that helps you find a very unique voice that you want to bring to the project or the creativity that you're working on. So I really love that. We talked a lot about embracing growth, and that success isn't about staying in one lane, it's about evolving and adapting while staying true to your vision. And yeah, it's like, it made me think so much over this year about being so busy. It was probably my busiest year I've ever had. And yet I didn't have an overarching kind of vision in mind. And I can see where my priorities and my scheduling and other things, really, I just almost let it go on autopilot. And I'm not saying I would do anything differently, but one thing I would say is if I have a year ahead to look ahead and say, what will I do differently, is I might just make sure that I have some true vision ahead to know at the end of 2025, if I want X, am I shooting for it? Am I trying for that specifically? So definitely learned a ton of that. The next one comes from Cesar Arvello, another good friend of mine that I had met over this year. I loved looking back at some of the episodes that we did over 2024, and it was all mostly from people that I had the incredible pleasure to meet this year. And the minute you meet someone, you could just tell, like, want to bring them on the podcast, want to like talk a little bit more about them and share their story so you guys can get some inspiration from them, right? But we really hit it off so much that I was like, dude, we just need to hang, because we don't live in the same city, and the podcast is always a great excuse for that, which was awesome. But we talked about, does school really matter for young designers, and what a young designer can do above and beyond what they're just getting in school. And some of the stuff we talked about was focus on story, not just style. And I might be guilty of this in the past, of teaching more about style, and not thinking about story when I was teaching my students, particularly in the Graphics 3 class that I teach, what storytelling does, what the benefit of storytelling is to the consumer, to the client, to the end customer, whatever it might be, and to inject that into everything we do. Because the great design is like more than the trend. It's about telling a meaningful story that resonates long term. And so it got me to think of the brands and things that I admire that have done some pretty beautiful work over the last 5 to 10 years, and it has stood the test of time. It has continued on and still is relevant. They didn't need the rebrand because they didn't go with the trend of the moment, And so can you do something that's both meaningful, beautiful design, and has that long-term advantage? And if you're a young designer and you're hitting the job market for the first time, or like we talked about in last week's episode about folks that have recently been either laid off or fortunately lost their job, this storytelling thing, I think, is the biggest game changer to help you stand out in a sea of tons of people out there that are probably competing for whatever job you're going for. And lastly here, we talked a little bit about timelessness over trends. I love this one because we could use trends. We can identify what's working, what's new about something, and how it's making something, how it's moving the needle for a consumer, for a client, for a company, or whatever it might be. But always prioritize that design can evolve and grow with the brand. Like this idea that, can it continue on? Is it future-proof? Is it helping is this design helping your client or your company that you work for make it last through time? Because when it's too trendy, there's a fear that it's just out in a year. And I've been guilty of that so many times, because you just think it's the perfect thing for a current client or project that you're working on. I've learned over this last year to truly make sure that the trend is in there to help for pure inspiration, but prioritize that design can evolve and grow with the brand over the years. So that's number 3. Love that idea as well. Number 4, this is all about retro. This was our nostalgia episode. And I don't think I've had an episode really resonate and get some immediate comments back from a lot of you after it dropped. I haven't seen that in a while. And it was so neat to see that I had tapped into something that a lot of you were tapped into. And I heard from 2 or 3 people immediately, like on LinkedIn, that were like, this couldn't have come at a better time. I'm currently exploring something in this nostalgic vibe for a client or a project that they were working on. So it was really cool to see that resonate with you guys as well. Connect to memories. That was the thing that really stood out to me. Nostalgic design works best when it's tapped into an emotional connection and reinforces a brand's identity. So it's that perfect marriage we talked about. Does it resonate with the consumer for some reason? And then does the brand's story or the brand's offering relate to that in some way? Are they connected? Because if it doesn't, it won't have that lasting feeling. But if it does, then the work you've created in a nostalgic, call it vintage, whatever, throwback style, if it's aligned with the brand or the company or the project you're working on, then win-win, right? If it doesn't, then it feels like a push. Then it feels like, oh, we were just doing this because of that design aesthetic looked great. And it didn't really vibe or mesh with the project that we're talking about. And the second big takeaway on here was modern meets vintage. So this idea that using retro-inspired styles and blending them with that modern design aesthetic is a really great way for the elements to stay fresh and relevant. And I got a great chance to, in one of our other episodes, to show you guys the entire Little Billies that we did for a client out here in Newport Beach. And I'm so happy to see how that blend of nostalgia, warmth, wholesome, friendly, all the things that were part of our original mood boards that were very nostalgic and very much a throwback, it's really doing well. And I get to see all these people that are posting and tag them, particularly like on Instagram, and talking about how much of the experience that they really loved. And I saw one guy who recently posted something and I had to comment back to him. And it was so wonderful that he held up the mug and the cold brew and a few other things and just said, like, look at this, you'll remember this little mascot. And I thought, oh, that was such a great feeling to see that it wasn't just a great design aesthetic, but it was tapped into the DNA of that brand, and it worked. So that was number 4. Number 5, this came from, the creative pain himself, Mr. Tyler Pate. We did this thing on Your Work Won't Speak Unless You Do, and we were talking about branding yourself, self-marketing. How are you putting yourself out there to get the word out? Even if it's a job opportunity, new clients, whatever it might be. And this importance of putting yourself out there. Don't wait for an opportunity. Share your process, promote the work you're doing, and let people see your passion. And I can't think of anybody that in the last year or two that I've seen or that I've truly discovered that does it better than Tyler. The Creative Pain is his handle on Instagram if you want to take a quick look and see what I'm talking about. But in addition to everything he does as a 9-to-5, he gets to put out this work that shows off exactly what he wants to do, what he is best at, what like sings his passion beyond belief. Like you cannot look at the work he's doing and think he's not just smiling and having a great time while he's working on it. It's just that him, you know? And we talked a lot about that. Like how can you put yourself out there? How can you do these things to show it? And it just makes so much sense. If that's the kind of work you want to get hired for, do a bunch of it. Put it out there. Be continuous with it. Show it off over and over again. And it led to our second point, which was show up consistently. Building a brand isn't overnight. It takes time. It takes you to be dedicated, pushing it out there, staying authentic to who it is, waiting for that moment where it either catches on and enough people get it and go like, wow, I'm actually anticipating your next move. I love that. And he just keeps showing up, and it really does attract the right audiences. And when he told some stories about how the things he did that were his true passion, he did it for the love of the art, actually became 2 to 3 of his biggest clients, worldwide clients, that went to him because of the work that he showed. So I just really love that. Your work won't speak unless you do. That was number 5. The next one, number 6, connections create opportunities. This came from last week's LinkedIn Referral Revolution episode. And like I said, when I started this episode, this came out of just complete necessity, having too many conversations with people that are just beyond overwhelmed and stressed in this job search world that is now. And having to look through a ton of really good research and find some great content, interviews, people that really have their finger on the pulse right now of what's happening. They had this idea that connections create opportunity. And it led me to totally remember that every person I know who landed, let's just even call it even the better or the best job that they've ever had in this last year, it came from a connection and a referral, a recommendation, whatever you might want to call it. Just this network connection made the opportunity happen. And it's like that definition of luck. It's timing, but you also have to have the goods behind you. You have to have the proof that you're the right person. So if someone does make that recommendation and recommends you for a job, there's that moment of, you got it. Now, do you have everything needed to back up and fulfill that situation based on the recommendation you had? The second thing we had here was network with purpose. Don't just add connections. That's not going to do you any good unless you engage, you share with them, you comment on their work, you start meaningful conversations with these people to build that relationship. This is a person that, again, like you might never actually meet, but they can be an advocate for you online in this world, and building more and more of these connections authentically and in meaningful conversations will definitely make some difference and hopefully help you in that search for the next job. Showcasing your value. That's the other thing that we talked about a lot in that episode as well. If you use LinkedIn and your profile as more than just a digital resume, highlight the projects, show off visuals, put in a PDF and a carousel and whatever it might be, or a mini case study for something you just did. Make sure you're getting the testimonials and the recommendations as well. This whole thing now becomes this living, breathing resume / portfolio / personal branding page of you to get the word out and to make sure those connections are being made. And when someone does land on your page to check you out, it's flawless. And it shows that you are engaged, it shows you're interested, it shows you love this industry that you're in. And there's your chance to do it. And I just love this idea of mastering LinkedIn. And creatives are still so new to this that I think it's still a perfect opportunity to take advantage of and be some of the first in our industry to truly use it and help it broaden your horizons for whatever the future is. All right, so that was, I believe, number 6. We're on to number 7. Be bold, but stay clear. This was a episode that Mikkel and I did about standing out and not getting overlooked. Main theme of a lot of these is standing out, getting your word out, hopefully getting a job, hopefully getting that new client, whatever it is. Some of the things we talked about as far as being bold, but stay clear, was balance, creativity, and clarity. So a bold design will grab attention for sure, but clear messaging keeps consumers engaged. We talked so much about this balancing creative and clarity. And if your creative is not clear and doesn't get the message across, is that a wasted opportunity, right? Did they get attention? Did the viewer see it and there was no payoff? And again, it's the same way as if you're presenting art to anyone to be judged and saying, I'm gonna hire you, I'm going to say yes to this design or whatever it might be. Wow them with the creative, wow them with the bold design, but pull at their emotional, chords with the messaging. And that's why I think copy is such a huge part of what we get to do as well. And if you're not utilizing a lot of these new things like ChatGPT and other things to help you turn your message into the most clear, most focused, and most kind of, what's the right word? See, I could be using it right now. I love the how it's transformed my words into something so much more meaningful and targeted to who exactly that audience might be for that particular moment. And it allows me to make that clear messaging, and it allows me to sell and be more confident when I'm selling an idea. So make sure you're doing that. And number 2 in this area was cut through the noise. And we mentioned about don't be afraid to push that boundary. There's the word again, boundaries, right? But always ensure that the message is easy to understand at a glance. And there have been many times I've seen wonderful designs, particularly in like food and beverage packaging, where it does catch my eye. Then I go and grab it and you can't tell what it is. If you know what it is, you can't tell what the flavor is. If you know what the flavor is, you can't see any notes or anything about what's inside. That's where the messaging failed, but the impact of the design got me. So you cut through the noise, but make sure that the message is easy to understand. So that was number 7. We're gonna move on to number 8. And this was one with another good friend, a new friend over the year, Mr. Jeff Lopiato. And Jeff is an incredible designer. He's got a great Instagram as well, showing his process all the time. And we finally got to hang out in Miami at a Adobe event this year. So it was really great to kind of meet him after chatting with him. It was kind of the opposite. Usually I was meeting folks and then getting him on the podcast. In this case, I loved what he was doing on socials and had him on. We talked a lot about sustainability and how it's not just a trend. Sustainability has now lasted enough in our world when it comes to design, packaging, whatever it might be. Even companies that we technically might get to work for are in that field. It's no longer just this trend because it has such a long-lasting kind of advantage. If we could do things that are more responsible in our design, it will inspire more. It will lead to more success. And again, that's why I see like this line that we put in here as far as what the standout was sustainability isn't just a trend. So great design should inspire the action and leave a positive impact on both people and the planet. So if you're doing something that could truly benefit both, how cool is that? Some of the supporting things we talked about, design drives change. So, thoughtful packaging and graphic design can reduce waste. It can promote reusability. That's always a fun thing to do. If it's too out of budget to do something in the more recycled material or recycled paper or soy inks or whatever that might be, you can truly promote something really cool by it having a second use, by using the packaging for something different at the end. So reducing waste, promoting reusability, and encouraging consumers to make eco-conscious choices. And if that's something that never been a part of your design world, again, it's one of those new things now. I urge you to watch that episode because it could be new things that are in your toolbox. And you never know when you're gonna need to impress someone with some of your knowledge that you might know here. And the other thing we talked about was authenticity builds trust. So if you're sharing your process the way he puts it out there on social media, it helps create these deeper connections with your audience. And it's turning a follower into an advocate or into a fan of sustainability by the way he's doing it. And also I love transparency. I love people sharing their process of, he does a lot of great stuff where he shows some typography that he's set for a brand, but he gets in there and like starts customizing it or roughens it or does something unique to it to make it the brand's own. And I love that idea of like all that little authenticity is what we could do to build trust with not only a social media follower or someone that we're trying to grab attention to there, but to a potential client or to a potential employer. So it's always good to have something that's a little bit different, might not technically be in your toolbox now, but you can get it in there and speak the language when someone asks. So that was number 8. Number 9, this came from a really good episode with my buddy Alejo. Alejo does the sketch notes, an incredible talented guy. Met him at Creative South and he showed me this beautiful drawing he did. As I was talking, he took notes in a way that I had never seen before. And these sketch note things are so beautifully like summarize what happens in a conversation or a town hall or whatever it might be. And it's a way to not just take notes, but to have visual, beautiful drawings and illustrations along with it. So the takeaway here was good design isn't just about making things look pretty. It's about solving problems and telling stories that stick. And everything he did, the way he turned certain words, I remember I said something like AI is your co-pilot, and he drew this little picture of me on a motorcycle with like a little unicycle with the sidecar on it, and there's a little AI character and they're going like, hi, I'm your co-pilot. And I just thought that was like the neatest way of saying like, I loved that line in the presentation, but the way he turned it into a visual by giving me something like that, that's what made it stick. That was the thing that like, and I think 2 or 3 people brought that line up to me as well, and I showed them the visual that Alejo made, and I just thought that was the neatest little thing. So some of the little supporting points we talked about was creativity with purpose, great design balances aesthetics and functions, and it ensures that every visual direction serves a clear purpose and communicates effectively. I love that idea. It's like communicating effectively through what we're doing. I think that's been a running kind of theme throughout everything we were talking about. Also talked about like adapting or fading. And the best designers stay sharp, they evolve, they look at trends, they look at technology, while they're keeping their storytelling at the core of their work. So this year, being that it was probably the most we've ever seen technology infiltrate our entire industry, I think that's the number one thing I've been trying to do is keep that human touch, keep the storytelling alive as you got into any new trend, any new technology, or anything new that kind of came our way. So again, love that idea. If you haven't checked out that one, that was such a good one. Alejo brought up such great points about how he got into his career and the struggles of kind of finding your way in a very niche thing that not a lot of people knew about, but he now becomes the only person in the room in some cases that does what he does. So a really great one. And last but not least, this is number 10, and this is design for the shelf, not for the studio. I looked back at the episode we just did with Fred Hart, all about the idea of making sure you are being truthful, you're getting all of that out there. How do you sell to a client and avoid the inevitable, I don't like it? Or how are we shifting a client from saying no? When you design for the shelf and not for the studio, that means for the shelf means the consumer, for longevity, for standing out, for clearly communicating. It kind of sums up almost everything we talked about in 1 through 9 here. And this idea that if it does that, and the client is well aware that this solution has to include all of that, your best chances of getting them to say yes, or as if you've walked them along the process and they've been a part of all those decision-making things, and you tell them all the qualifications that this packaging has to have or this design has to have. So when they see it and you've analyzed it and you've pinpointed all of those advantages, how could they say no? Because if they're saying no, it now refers to something that has nothing to do with the shelf, nothing to do with the consumer, nothing to do with the person making the decision to buy it. So I just thought that was awesome. Think shelf impact first. Packaging needs to stand out in the real world environment and design with scale, contrast, visibility in mind. Always important to do that. And emotion drives decisions. Yeah, that's the one I use this all the time in my classroom. I love this idea of striking a chord with the consumer, with the person that you are trying to attract with whatever you're doing here. You've got color, you've got typography, you've got storytelling, you've got all these great things to create, and try your best to make the emotional connection with that consumer so they pick that one to purchase, to buy, to subscribe, whatever it may be. So that was it, guys. That was it, 1 through 10, the big takeaways, the words of wisdom, and the things that I feel were super important. And I kept it top level because I didn't want to go too far into the details here, but just a great way to recap, have a great conversation at the end of the year. If there's been anything that you really, really liked about the last year of programming with our episodes, please make sure you comment on either Instagram, where we have the post, YouTube, where we have the video, or Spotify, where you can comment there as well. We'd love to hear what you got out of this year, some of the things that I hope resonated with you as well. And I can't wait for next year because I really feel like we're on a roll, and trying to do this weekly thing has really got us thinking of the next year ahead. And I hope it's going to be just as good, if not better. So until then, guys, Happy New Year. We'll see you in 2025. Take care. Bye.